I remember the sound before everything went quiet. Metal twisting. Glass bursting. A scream that I later realized was mine. Then nothing. They told me afterward that the truck ran the red light. That it wasn't my fault. That I should be grateful to be alive. But none of that mattered when I opened my eyes and realized my stomach felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. The lights above me were too bright. My body felt heavy, like I was trapped inside wet sand. Machines kept beeping around me, steady and cold, reminding me I was still here even though part of me felt gone. I tried to move. Pain shot through my chest. I tried to speak. My throat burned, and only a weak sound came out. A nurse noticed and rushed over. Her voice was gentle, practiced, careful in the way people speak when they're afraid of breaking you. "You're safe," she said. "You were in an accident. We had to move fast." My heart began pounding. I grabbed her wrist with what little strength I had. "My baby," I whispered. "Where is my baby?" She hesitated. Just for a second. But that second was enough to make my chest tighten with fear. "She's alive," the nurse said finally. "She came early, but she's alive. She's in the NICU." Alive. That word held me together. I closed my eyes and let tears spill down my face. I didn't care how weak I looked. I didn't care who saw me cry. Then the nurse added something that made my stomach drop. "Your parents are here." I stared at her, confused. My parents hadn't been there for me in months. They barely answered my calls after I told them I was pregnant. They didn't come to appointments. They didn't ask how I was feeling. They didn't ask about the baby. And now they were here? Why? I asked. She didn't answer directly. Just said, "They're listed as emergency contacts." That night, they wheeled me closer to the NICU. I couldn't walk. My body refused to cooperate. But I begged to see her. I needed proof that she was real. That she had survived. Through the glass, I saw her. So small. So quiet. Covered in wires and tubes. My daughter. My heart felt like it cracked open and stitched itself back together at the same time. Then I saw my parents standing there. My mother's arms were crossed tightly, like she was holding herself back from something. My father stood beside her, eyes fixed on the floor, hands clenched. The doctor explained the situation calmly. That my daughter would need special care. That the next few weeks were critical. That consent was needed to continue certain treatments because I was still recovering. My mother didn't even blink. "We refuse," she said. The word echoed in the room. The doctor looked confused. "I'm sorry?" "She is not our responsibility," my mother said, her voice sharp and steady. "This child is not something we accept." I tried to scream. I tried to sit up. My body wouldn't obey me. "She's my baby," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Please." My father finally spoke, his voice flat and distant. "You made your choices." And then they turned around and walked away. Just like that. I lay there shaking, not from pain but from something deeper. Something colder. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes quietly, with people who raised you deciding you're no longer worth standing beside. That night, I stared at the ceiling while my daughter fought for her life in another room. Nurses moved in and out, offering comfort they couldn't possibly give enough of. I felt alone in a way I had never felt before. The next morning, the door opened and someone walked in slowly. My grandfather. He was old, quiet, and rarely spoke more than he had to. But his presence filled the room in a way no one else's ever had. He sat beside me, took my hand, and didn't say anything at first. Then he asked softly, "Where is the child?" I couldn't answer. The nurse explained everything. Every word my parents said. Every choice they made. Grandpa closed his eyes. His jaw tightened. He stood up slowly and said only one thing. "Take me to them." I didn't hear what he said to my parents. Not right away. But later that day, I saw my mother sitting in a chair, her face pale, her hands shaking. My father stood beside her, silent, staring straight ahead. A nurse leaned close to me and whispered, "Your grandfather said one sentence." I asked what it was. She said, "He told them that the world will never forget how they treated their own blood, and neither will he." From that moment on, everything began to change. My parents tried to come back. Tried to explain. Tried to soften their words. But something had shifted. The hospital staff no longer looked at them the same way. Family members started calling, asking questions they couldn't answer without shame. My daughter grew stronger. Every day she fought a little harder. And every day I learned that family is not defined by who shares your name, but by who stands with you when it matters most. Weeks later, when I finally held my daughter in my arms, I made a promise to her. That she would never feel unwanted. That she would never be treated as a mistake. That no matter what, I would choose her every single time. My parents lost more than they realized that day. They lost trust. They lost respect. And most of all, they lost the right to decide who mattered. Because sometimes revenge doesn't come with shouting or anger. Sometimes it comes quietly, through truth, through time, and through living well without the people who refuse to stand by you. And the lesson I learned is simple. Love shows up. The days after that felt unreal, like I was watching my own life from a distance. My body healed faster than my heart ever could. Bruises faded. Cuts closed. But the image of my parents turning their backs on my newborn stayed sharp, replaying in my mind every night when the hospital grew quiet. They started coming back after Grandpa spoke to them. At first, they stood outside my room, unsure, like strangers waiting for permission. My mother peeked in, her eyes red, her voice suddenly soft. She asked the nurses how I was doing, as if she hadn't shattered me days earlier with a single word. I didn't look at her. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I didn't trust myself to speak. My father tried next. He brought fruit, flowers, things people bring when they think kindness can erase memory. He stood near the door and said my name the way he used to when I was a child. I stayed silent. Because silence, I learned, can be louder than any argument. My grandfather visited every day. He sat with me, held my daughter when I was too weak, and never once pressured me to forgive. He never said, "They're still your parents." He never said, "Try to understand." Instead, he said, "You owe nobody your pain." Those words settled deep inside me. Word spread quickly through the family. Aunts called. Cousins whispered. People who had once sided with my parents now asked careful questions, afraid of hearing answers that would change how they saw them. And it did change everything. My mother had always cared about image. About how things looked from the outside. About being respected. About being seen as a good parent, a good woman, a good example. Now people looked at her differently. Not with anger. With disappointment. And that hurt her more than shouting ever could. One afternoon, she finally came in alone. She sat across from my bed and cried openly, her shoulders shaking. She said she was scared. She said she didn't know what to do. She said she panicked and said things she couldn't take back. I listened. And for the first time, I realized something important. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry it was seen. I told her calmly, "You didn't refuse me. You refused her." She had no answer. My father never apologized at all. He avoided my eyes, spoke in short sentences, and left quickly every time. His silence was his way of admitting guilt without facing it. When my daughter finally left the NICU, healthy and strong, my grandfather drove us home himself. He carried her inside like she was something sacred. Like she was proof that love can still grow in broken places. My parents weren't there. They called. They asked when they could visit. They asked if they could help. I said I needed time. That time turned into distance. Distance turned into peace. Months passed. My daughter learned to smile. To laugh. To recognize my voice. Every milestone felt like a quiet victory. Every night I held her close, knowing I had protected her from feeling unwanted, even if it meant losing people who should have loved her first. My parents tried to fix things publicly. They offered gifts. They posted messages. They told relatives they were misunderstood. But truth has a way of standing still while excuses run out of breath. The real revenge wasn't denying them access. It was living well without them. It was choosing my child without hesitation. It was breaking a cycle they never thought I'd escape. One day, my mother finally said, "We didn't raise you like this." And I answered, "No. I raised myself into this." She went quiet. Years later, my daughter asked why her grandparents weren't around much. I told her the truth in words gentle enough for a child to understand. I told her some people don't know how to love the right way, and that it's okay to step back from those people. She nodded and went back to playing, safe and whole. That's when I knew I had won. Not by hurting them. Not by exposing them loudly. But by choosing love over fear, and truth over approval. Because family isn't who refuses you in your weakest moment. Family is who stays. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk forward without the people who taught you how to walk in the first place. Time has a strange way of revealing things people try to hide. As my daughter grew, so did the distance between me and my parents. It wasn't loud or dramatic. There were no fights, no shouting matches, no doors slammed. Just fewer calls. Fewer visits. Fewer attempts that felt real. And the world noticed. Family gatherings became awkward. People stopped inviting my parents to talk about me. When my name came up, conversations changed tone. Some people defended them out of habit. Others stayed quiet. Silence became the answer nobody wanted to give. My parents had always believed authority came from being older. From being obeyed. From never apologizing. But age without humility turns into loneliness faster than anyone expects. I watched it happen slowly. My mother began calling more often, not to ask about my daughter, but to talk about herself. About how tired she felt. How people treated her differently. How unfair life had become. I listened. And for the first time I understood something clearly. They weren't losing me. They were losing control. One afternoon, years later, my father showed up unannounced. He stood at my door, older, smaller, quieter. He looked past me and saw my daughter playing on the floor. She looked up, smiled politely, then went back to her toys. She didn't know him. That moment broke something in him. He sat down slowly and said, "She doesn't recognize me." I answered calmly, "No. She recognizes who stayed." He nodded. No argument. No defense. Just acceptance. That was the real consequence. Not anger. Not punishment. Irrelevance. My daughter grew surrounded by love. By safety. By people who chose her every day. She never questioned her worth. Never wondered if she was a burden. Never felt like she had to earn affection. And that healed something in me too. One night, after she fell asleep, I thought about forgiveness. About whether I should offer it. About whether it would make me lighter. Then I realized something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean undoing truth. I forgave them quietly, for myself. But I never handed them the power to hurt us again. My grandfather passed away when my daughter was old enough to remember his voice. At his funeral, my mother cried harder than anyone. She held my hand and whispered, "He never stopped believing in you." I knew. Because he believed in action, not words. Years ago, he had said one line that changed everything. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. He told them they would live long enough to feel the weight of what they chose. And they did. Not through suffering. Through absence. If you're listening to this and you've ever been rejected by the people who were supposed to protect you, understand this. Their refusal does not define your worth. Their silence does not erase your value. And their regret does not require your sacrifice. Sometimes justice is quiet. Sometimes revenge is simply living whole. And sometimes the strongest response to betrayal is building a life so full that their absence no longer leaves a shadow. I survived a crash that day. But my daughter survived something even bigger. She survived being unwanted because I chose her. Every time. And that choice changed everything.